I've chosen to read a passage from Chapter 9 of The Great Gatsby, pages 178 to 180, the last 4 pages of the book. One afternoon, late in October, I saw Tom Buchanan. He was walking ahead of me along Fifth Avenue in his alert, aggressive way, his hands out a little from his body as if to fight off interference, his head moving sharply here and there, adapting itself to his restless eyes. Just as I slowed up to avoid overtaking him, he stopped and began frowning into the windows of a jewelry store. Suddenly he saw me and walked back, holding out his hand. "What's the matter, Nick? Do you object to shaking hands with me?" "Yes. You know what I think of you." "You're crazy, Nick," he said quickly. "Crazy as hell. I don't know what's the matter with you." "Tom," I inquired, "what did you say to Wilson that afternoon?" He stared at me without a word, and I knew I had guessed right about those missing hours. I started to turn away, but he took a step after me and grabbed my arm. "I told him the truth," he said. "He came to the door while we were getting ready to leave, and when I sent down word that we weren't in, he tried to force his way upstairs. He was crazy enough to kill me if I hadn't told him who owned the car. His hand was on a revolver in his pocket every minute he was in the house." He broke off defiantly. "What if I did tell him? That fellow had it coming to him anyway. He threw dust into your eyes just like he did in Daisy's. But he was a tough one. He ran over Myrtle like you'd run over a dog, and never even stopped his car." There was nothing I could say, except the one unutterable fact that it wasn't true. "And if you think I didn't have my share of suffering, look here. When I went to give up that flat and saw that damn box of dog biscuits sitting there on the sideboard, I sat down and cried like a baby. By God, it was awful. I couldn't forgive him or like him, but I saw that what he had done was, to him, entirely justified. It was all very careless and confused. They were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness, or whatever it was that kept them together, and let other people clean up the mess they had made." I shook hands with him. It seemed silly not to, for I felt suddenly as though I were talking to a child. Then he went into the jewelry store to buy a pearl necklace, or perhaps only a pair of cuff buttons, rid of my provincial squeamishness forever. Gatsby's house was still empty when I left. The grass on his lawn had grown as long as mine. One of the taxi drivers in the village never took a fare past the entrance gate without stopping for a minute and pointing inside. Perhaps it was he who drove Daisy and Gatsby over to East Egg the night of the accident, and perhaps he had made a story about it all his own. I didn't want to hear it, and I avoided him when I got off the train. I spent my Saturday nights in New York, because those gleaming, dazzling parties of his were with me so vividly that I could still hear the music and the laughter, faint and incessant, from his garden, and the cars going up and down his drive. One night I did hear a material car there, and saw its lights stop at its front steps. But I didn't investigate. Probably it was some final guest who had been away at the ends of the earth and didn't know that the party was over. On the last night, with my trunk packed and my car sold to the grocer, I went over and looked at that huge, incoherent failure of a house once more. On the white steps, an obscene word, scrawled by some boy with a piece of brick, stood out clearly in the moonlight, and I erased it, drawing my shoe raspingly along the stone. Then I wandered down to the beach and sprawled out on the sand. Most of the big shore places were closed now, and there were hardly any lights except the shadowy, moving glow of a ferry boat across the Sound. And as the moon rose higher, the inessential houses began to melt away until gradually I became aware of the old island here that flowered once for Dutch sailors' eyes, a fresh, green beast of the New World. Its vanished trees, the trees that had made way for Gatsby's house, had once pandered in whispers to the last and greatest of all human dreams. For a transitory, enchanted moment, man must have held his breath in the presence of this continent, compelled into an aesthetic contemplation he neither understood nor desired, face to face for the last time in history with something commensurate to his capacity for wonder. As I sat there, brooding on the old, unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dream must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in the vast obscurity beyond the city, where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night. Gatsby believed in the green light, the orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther, and one fine morning. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. This passage occurs at the very end of the book, after Gatsby has been killed by George Wilson and before Nick has returned to the Middle West. Nick is disgusted with Tom because he told Wilson that Gatsby killed Myrtle. Gatsby was innocent, of course, but Daisy had selfishly allowed him to take the blame for the murder. Nick and Gatsby's father had attended Gatsby's funeral, but Tom and Daisy had left town. Fitzgerald writes, "They were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their vast carelessness, or whatever it was that kept them together, and let other people clean up the mess they had made." Fitzgerald is discussing the main ongoing theme in the book, the morally corrupt American dream of the 1920s. After World War I, Americans became fascinated with materialism, wealth, and the pursuit of pleasure. They did anything and everything that made them happy, no matter the consequences. Morals were cast astray as happiness took the place of integrity. Tom and Daisy are the epitome of this abundant hedonism during the 1920s. They live in their extravagant mansion with their designer clothes, attentive servants, and rich food and wine. Their true nature is revealed when they leave town right after Gatsby is killed. Daisy doesn't even acknowledge that Gatsby died because he wanted to protect her and her reputation. She doesn't attend his funeral or let the truth be known. Instead, she runs away like a little girl in trouble. Tom feels his actions, telling Wilson that Gatsby killed Myrtle, are completely justified because of Gatsby's nature and his affair with Daisy. He tells Nick that Gatsby had it coming to him anyway. Fitzgerald uses another example in this passage to represent Tom and Daisy's materialism when he writes that Nick sees Tom going into a jewelry store to buy a pearl necklace or a pair of cuff buttons. The parties Gatsby throws are further manifestations of the carefree attitude that was so popular during the time. The result of this self-indulgent lifestyle is a lonely and forgotten death. Gatsby's house was empty and uncared for, and obscenity was written on the steps, and Nick couldn't even get anyone besides his father to attend the funeral. I think a significant idea included in this passage is the fine distinction between chasing your dreams and clinging to the past. Gatsby's dream seems so close to reality, but the more he reached for his dream, the further it slipped away into the past. Gatsby went to great extents to reinvent himself for a new life with Daisy, but she had already accepted her life with Tom and loved him. Fitzgerald compares Gatsby's road to Daisy to the journey of Dutch sailors to the New World. They had longed for days, weeks, and months to see the fresh land of a new world in hope that all their work had not been futile. Gatsby was the exact same way. He worked for years to acquire a fortune and build up an image so that Daisy would consider him her equal. He could only hope to run into Daisy at one of his parties, just like the sailors could only keep going forward in their ships with the hope that their dream would become a reality. The dreams were so similar, but the ending so different. When Gatsby finally saw Daisy again, she looked as lovely to him as America looked to the land-deprived sailors. From this idea in the book, we can infer the author's viewpoint that American dreams are often elusive figments of the past. No matter how much we want them, they are sometimes simply too far in the past to be possible. Fitzgerald writes that Gatsby came so close to accomplishing his dream, only to find that it had already passed behind him. The author uses imagery to make Gatsby's dream tangible in the form of a green light. Throughout the book, the green light at the end of Daisy's dock is a symbol of Gatsby's hopes and dreams for the future. He believed in the green light and the promise of a new life with Daisy, but that dream had already escaped into the past. Fitzgerald uses imagery once again to describe the futility of chasing forlorn dreams. He uses a stylistic device, the metaphor, to liken the attempts to boats struggling against the current, fighting to intertwine the past with their hopes for the future. The author uses yet another stylistic device, alliteration, in the title of the book, The Great Gatsby. This passage is full of themes, symbols, imagery, and ambiguities, but one rings especially loud and clear to me. Material prosperity does not equal true happiness. Pleasure at the moment does not mean long-term joy. I found that learning about the corrupt dream of the 1920s propelled me into the opposite state of mind, that giving is more important than taking, and happiness means more than a flat-screen TV and a Ferrari. I found this to be the most important lesson of The Great Gatsby.